everyone, this is lesson 1.1b, Introduction to Psychology, the Important People. Ms. Desario here. Good news, the ice cream truck has left. Yes, I record multiples of these in the same day. So before we get started today, please make sure that you have your psychology yearbook. You are not taking these notes in your Unit 1 note guide. You are using the psychology yearbook for this because I'm going to be introducing a lot of important people that you're going to need to know for the AP exam. So we create a yearbook so that you can keep that throughout the course, and then at the end when we're reviewing for the AP exam, you can take another look at that and have a good idea of who everybody is and who you need to know. Okay, so here we have Mr. Wilhelm Wundt. That is who you see, and you might remember him from yesterday's lesson. And he is important because we call him the father of psychology. You are definitely going to want to know that this man is the father of psychology. That pops up on AP questions frequently enough. And the reason why we call him the father of psychology is because he set up the first psychology laboratory. At the University of Leipzig, Germany. So he was a German and he set up his lab there. Another important figure to know is Mr. Stanley Hall. Mr. Stanley Hall set up the first lab in the United States. He was also the first president of the American Psychological Association, or also known as the APA. So Wilhelm Wundt is this person right here that is known as the father of psychology. So functionalism, remember, if you remember from yesterday's lesson, functionalism was the stream of consciousness, not just taking a look at consciousness and its elements. And these are two functionalist psychologists. The first one being William James. And he is the one that developed or came up with the stream of consciousness. And then to our right here, we have Mary Witten Calkins. And she was the first woman president of the APA. And an interesting fact about her is that she completed all of her studies for her PhD, but was never awarded a PhD because she was a woman. In fact, when she first started her studies under Mr. William James, all the other people in the course left. And so he just taught her and did not seem to be bothered by the fact that all the males that were in the class had left. And so she essentially received a singular education because the males left the program. And even though she completed all the PhD coursework, they never would award her a PhD degree. So we know Mary Calkins did not get a PhD, but the first woman to receive a PhD is the first woman here to our left, and this is Margaret Floyd Washburn. And she was the first woman PhD in psychology. The second woman you may know from any AP US History course that you took. This is Dorothea Dix. And Dorothea Dix is known for her attention that she brought to mental asylums and the reform that she brought because of people living in cages. And then third and finally, we have Dr. Inez Beverly Prosser, who was the first African-American woman to earn her PhD in psychology. And she did a lot of studies on the impact of race on young children. This is our good old boy, Sigmund Freud. We talked about him a little bit yesterday, and we'll talk about him much more, don't you worry. And Sigmund Freud did study the unconscious. So the id, the ego, and the superego, and how that impacts you as a person. Here we have behaviorism. Remember, behaviorism is this idea that behavior is learned, that we learn our behavior. The first individual that we have here is B.F. Skinner. I like to call him best friend Skinner as a way to remember. And he is known for operant conditioning. And we'll get into this more when we get on the chapter of behavior. But he essentially trained using a Skinner box. He trained pigeons and rats with a Skinner box in order to press a lever and get food. And he did that by rewarding their behavior, which is what we would consider operant conditioning. The last two that we have here is Watson. John Watson, I should say. John Watson and Rosalie Rayner. And both these two individuals were known that fear can be learned. And they did a study with little Albert and essentially taught a young child to fear anything white and fluffy. A third psychologist that's important to note that we don't have listed here, but that you need to know, is Ivan Pavlov. And I made a mistake yesterday on one of your slides. I said it was a picture of Sigmund Freud and his dog. That was not Sigmund Freud. It was Ivan Pavlov and his dogs. And that's going to be important to know later. But what he did was what we call classical conditioning. And we'll actually do a classical conditioning experiment virtually, or attempt to do it virtually. On classical conditioning, and this is where you essentially train yourself, or your body learns to respond to things automatically. Here we have Charles Darwin. He needs very little explanation. Charles Darwin, evolution. If you ever get a chance to look at his diary from his travels and where he discovered evolution, it is very fascinating. But he was about the fact that animals and people survive. Or how do animals and people survive? They adapt to their surroundings in order to create survival. So you can, on his name, just write evolution, or adaptation is fine. The next two, I apologize, I do not have pictures for, but we're going to talk about cognitive psychology, and that is going to be Jean Piaget. Ooh, let's see if we can get the pencil working. Jean Piaget. And he was known for focusing on child development. When we get to the development chapter, we will look into him a little bit more and how a child develops into a functional member of society. For humanistic psychology, we have Carl Rogers. And he is known for unconditional positive regard. Essentially, what that means is that no matter what, we view people with a positive outlook and a positive regard. Essentially, teachers and parents should have unconditional positive regard for their students and children, respectively. So these are some of the important psychologists that you need to know in your psychology yearbook. All you need to do in your psychology yearbook is just write down a word or two of how to remember these individuals. So that way you can at least provide some recognition when we hear their names come up again later throughout the course of this year, so that you have some familiarity with who they are.